Ryan's Office Revenge. Charles Williams decided I was worth $8,000 on Christmas week. That single decision ended a career he'd spent 15 years building and nearly killed 200 people. My name is Brian Patterson. I'm 49 years old, and I've been keeping pressure systems from exploding at Lone Star Petrochemical for 22 years. Some people think engineering is about computers and calculations. For me, it's about knowing which valve makes the difference between everyone going home safe and reading about us in the newspaper. That December morning, Charles stood at the front of the conference room holding his annual bonus announcements. The whole management team was there, about 15 of us who kept the refinery running. Charles had that look he got when he thought he was being generous. "Everyone gets a year-end bonus," he started, checking his notes like he was reading lottery numbers. "We want to thank you for another strong year." Names got called one by one. Kevin Rodriguez, $25,000. Kevin handled day shift logistics. Applause went around the table. Lisa Thompson, $25,000. Lisa supervised production scheduling. More clapping. Timothy Anderson, $25,000. Timothy worked in compliance. Important, sure, but he'd been here 8 years to my 22. I sat there doing the math. 6 people called so far, all $25,000. Standard pattern, standard amounts. I was calculating my share of the bonus pool when Charles looked at his paper and paused. Brian Patterson, $8,000. The room went dead quiet. Not polite quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when everyone realizes something's wrong, but nobody wants to be the first to mention it. Kevin looked at me, then looked away. Lisa studied her coffee like it had the meaning of life floating in it. Charles kept reading names. Michelle Davis from HR got $25,000. Stephen Miller from Safety got $25,000. Even the new guy who'd started in September got $15,000. I waited until the meeting broke up, and people started filing out before I caught Charles in the hallway. He was walking, fast, the way people do when they're hoping to avoid conversations. "Charles," I said, keeping pace with him, "can I ask why mine's different?" He didn't stop walking. "Different how?" "Everyone got something. Everyone else got $25,000. I got $8,000. He finally stopped and turned around. Irritation was already showing on his face, the kind he got when he thought people were questioning his judgment. "You're plateaued, Brian. This investment is for people with growth potential." Plateaued. Like 22 years of keeping the place from turning into a crater was some kind of dead-end job. "I manage the pressure control systems that keep this place from becoming a smoking hole in the ground," I said. "When those systems hiccup, I'm the one who knows which valve to turn and which one will blow us all to pieces." He cut me off before I could finish. "You're 49 years old, Brian. How much growth are we talking about here? Be grateful you're still relevant." Still relevant, like my 22 years of preventing disasters, was some kind of charity case the company was doing me. I didn't argue with him. I've learned that arguing with people like Charles just gives them more reasons to dismiss you. I went back to my desk, packed my bag, and drove home thinking about that word. Relevant. I called my ex-wife that night to tell her about the bonus situation. She needed to know because I help with our daughter's college expenses, and $17,000 less than expected was going to hurt. "That's ridiculous," she said. "You've been there longer than anyone." "Apparently that's the problem," I said. The bonus agreement showed up in my email the next morning, flagged as time-sensitive. I opened it, expecting the usual legal language about gratitude and company appreciation. The first page was standard stuff. Thank you for your dedication, recognition of your contributions, commitment to excellence. But halfway down page 2, I found what they really wanted. Recipient agrees to maintain full availability for emergency response, outside standard working hours as required by operational needs. I read that clause 3 times, Unlimited availability for emergency response. No mention of decision authority. No mention of additional compensation. No mention of limits on what emergency response meant. Just a promise to drop everything and come running whenever they called, for $8,000 minus taxes. I forwarded the document to HR with a simple question. Can we discuss these terms? Michelle Davis replied within 2 hours. Amount and conditions are standard and non-negotiable. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, I typed back. For $8,000 after taxes, I'm committing to unlimited emergency availability for systems I already know better than anyone else, with no authority to actually make decisions when emergencies happen. Her response was immediate. This agreement reflects your current role and responsibilities. Current role and responsibilities. The same role where I'd prevented 3 major incidents in the past years. The same responsibilities that had kept the plant running when other people's decisions nearly shut us down. I sat back in my chair and did something I hadn't done in 22 years. I thought about what would happen if I just did exactly what they were paying me to do. Nothing more, nothing less. I typed one word back to Michelle. Understood. Then I closed my email and made a decision that would change everything. That decision changed everything about how I approached my job. For 22 years, I'd been the guy who stayed late to catch problems before they became emergencies. The guy who came in on weekends to verify system integrity. The guy who did whatever it took to keep the plant safe, whether it was in my job description or not. Now I decided to do exactly what they were paying me for. Nothing more, nothing less. It didn't take long for people to notice. Kevin Rodriguez rolled his chair over to my desk the first week of January. You leaving right at shift change now? He asked. That's when my shift ends, I said. Usually you stick around to verify the handoff logs. Day shift can verify their own logs. That's what they get paid for. Kevin looked at me carefully. We'd worked together for 8 years, and he knew I wasn't the type to slack off. Everything okay? Everything's fine. I'm just being more disciplined about my role boundaries. Role boundaries. That was corporate speak for doing exactly what they're paying me to do, and not one bit more. The first real problems started showing up 3 weeks later. Unit 7 was one of our older pressure vessels, installed in 1987 and retrofitted twice since then. The containment systems were solid, but they required careful monitoring because the pressure dynamics were more complex than the newer units. I noticed the drift on a Tuesday morning. Small pressure variations that wouldn't trip any alarms, but showed a pattern I'd seen before. The containment seals were degrading faster than the maintenance schedule anticipated. In the old days, meaning 4 weeks ago, I would have called the maintenance supervisor directly and scheduled an immediate inspection. Instead, I documented the readings and filed a standard report through the proper channels. The report went to Lisa Thompson, my direct supervisor. Lisa had been promoted to operations management 2 years ago after working her way up from production scheduling. She was smart and dedicated, but she didn't have the technical background to evaluate pressure system warnings. Her response came back the next day. Day Engineering reviewed your report. They determined the variations are within acceptable parameters. Production will continue as scheduled. Day Engineering. That was the team of younger engineers who worked regular hours and dealt with problems using computer models and theoretical calculations. They were good at their jobs, but they'd never lived through a real system failure. I called Lisa directly. Lisa, I've seen this exact pressure pattern before. It led to a cascade failure in Unit 12 back in 2008. Brian, I appreciate your experience, but Day Engineering has all the same data you do. They analyzed it thoroughly. Day Engineering doesn't understand the pressure integration protocols on these older units. They treat each vessel as an independent system. That's the standard approach now. Everything is compartmentalized for safety. Compartmentalized for safety. Like pressure waves cared about organizational charts. Lisa, these units are physically connected. When one starts having containment issues, it affects the entire pressure network. You can't analyze them in isolation. Her voice got that careful tone people use when they think you're being difficult. Brian, we need to trust the team approach here. Day Engineering makes those technical decisions. The team approach. Code for your 22 years of experience doesn't matter because you're not in the right meetings. I'd seen this before. Younger engineers with computer models trumping, guys like me who'd actually lived through system failures. They had theoretical knowledge. I had scars from when things went wrong. Lisa, I was here in 2001 when Unit 12 blew. I was here in 2008 when we nearly lost the entire South Complex. I've seen what happens when we ignore early warning signs. That was different equipment, she said. Same physics, I replied. Pressure doesn't care how new your computer models are. After we hung up, I updated my documentation and sent another report. This time I included historical data from the 2008 incident, showing the identical progression pattern. I copied Charles directly on the email. His response came back in 10 minutes. Unit 7 is performing within acceptable parameters per engineering analysis. Focus on your assigned monitoring duties. My assigned monitoring duties. Like Unit 7 wasn't connected to every other pressure line in the complex. Kevin came by my desk that afternoon. He'd been watching the same readings I was tracking. You see, those pressure spikes in Unit 7? He asked quietly. I've been documenting them for 2 weeks. Day shift said it was nothing? Day shift doesn't want to hear about problems they can't fix in 8 hours. Kevin glanced around to make sure nobody else was listening. Off the record, if those seals blow during a pressure event, you're the only one who knows the emergency shutdown sequence for the integrated system. I looked at him. Kevin was good at his job, but he was also political enough to know when conversations needed to stay private. That's not something to say casually, I said. I know. That's why I'm saying it to you. That night, I went home and thought about Kevin's words. In 22 years, I'd prevented 3 major incidents that could have killed people. Each time, I'd acted on technical knowledge that wasn't in any manual and made decisions I wasn't technically authorized to make. But I'd also been valued then. My expertise had been respected. Management had trusted my judgment enough to give me the authority to act. Now they wanted me available for emergencies, but not empowered to prevent them. The pressure readings got worse over the next week. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger automatic alarms, but following the exact pattern I'd seen lead to failures before. Each day, I documented the progression. Each day, I filed reports through proper channels. And each day, those reports got dismissed by people who'd never seen a pressure vessel explode. The final warnings started flashing on a Tuesday morning in February. Still not full alarms, just yellow indicators that meant the system was working harder than it should. I pulled up the historical data and laid it side by side with readings from 2008. Identical progression, same pressure curves, same temperature variations, same timing intervals, like watching a rerun of a disaster movie where you know exactly how it ends. I called Charles directly this time. No more reports through channels, no more waiting for Lisa to forward my concerns to people who didn't understand them. Charles, Unit 7 is approaching critical threshold. We need a controlled shutdown within the next 6 hours. Based on what? He asked. Based on 22 years of watching these systems fail. Brian, I need data, not hunches. I've been providing data for 3 weeks. Every report I've filed shows the same progression toward failure. There was a pause. Day Engineering reviewed all your reports. They don't see any immediate risk. Day Engineering is reading the wrong metrics. Another pause. Submit your concerns through proper channels. If engineering agrees with your assessment, we'll consider emergency action. Proper channels. The same people who'd been dismissing my warnings for 3 weeks. I hung up and stared at my screens. In 6 hours, those yellow warnings were going to turn red. And when they did, I was going to find out exactly how much my 22 years of experience was really worth. The first real alarm hit at 2:47 p.m. Not a yellow warning this time. A red alert that meant Unit 7's pressure containment was approaching its design limits. The alarm system sent automatic notifications to every supervisor in the plant. My phone started ringing immediately. Charles again. This time his voice was different, tighter, more focused. "Brian, we're seeing critical alerts on Unit 7. I need you to take a look. What I'm seeing is the beginning of the cascade failure I warned you about 3 weeks ago," I said, pulling up the real-time displays on my screen. "Can you stabilize it remotely? Not without full shutdown authority for the integrated system, and not without taking Units 5 and 6 offline as backup protection." There was a pause. That would shut down $2 million worth of daily production. "Charles, if this goes critical, you're looking at $100 million in direct damage, plus environmental cleanup, plus regulatory fines, plus potential casualties. Just see what you can do within normal parameters. See what I could do within normal parameters." After 3 weeks of telling me to stay within normal parameters, while the system marched steadily toward failure. "I've been documenting this progression for 3 weeks, I said. "Every recommendation I've made has been dismissed. Now you want me to prevent the disaster I told you was coming?" "Brian, this isn't the time for—" "This is exactly the time," I said. "You've had 3 weeks to authorize preventive action. You chose not to." I hung up and sat back in my chair. Kevin Rodriguez had moved his workstation closer to mine, watching the displays over my shoulder. "They want you to jump in?" he asked quietly. "They want me to fix what they refused to prevent. Can you?" I looked at the pressure readings climbing steadily into the red zone. "Maybe. If I override 6 safety protocols and shut down half the complex without authorization, that's a career-ending move if you're wrong. It's a career-ending move if I'm right, too, because tomorrow they'll ask why I didn't follow proper channels." My phone was buzzing constantly now. Text messages from Lisa Thompson. Missed calls from operations managers I'd never spoken to before. Voicemails from executives who normally communicated through 3 layers of subordinates. At 3:15, the pressure alarms went critical. Unit 7's containment system was failing exactly the way I'd predicted, following the same pattern I'd documented from the 2008 incident. But this time was different. This time, management had 3 weeks of warnings that they'd chosen to ignore. Kevin pointed at his screen. "They're trying manual pressure relief on Unit 7. I watched the readouts. Day Engineering was attempting to stabilize the vessel by venting pressure through the relief valves. It was textbook procedure for an isolated unit failure." "That's going to make it worse," I said. "Why?" "Because Unit 7 isn't failing in isolation. The pressure differential they're creating will force Units 5 and 6 to compensate. That's what triggers the cascade." On the emergency communication channel, voices started overlapping. Unit 5 showing anomalous readings, Unit 6 pressure climbing faster than normal. "Why are we getting temperature warnings on the interconnect lines?" Someone I didn't recognize came on the channel. "Get Brian Patterson on this call immediately." My phone rang. Charles again. I looked at his name on the screen. Then I thought about the bonus meeting, about being told I was plateaued, about being told to be grateful for relevance, about 3 weeks of warnings being dismissed because Day Engineering had computer models. I declined the call. Kevin stared at me. "Brian, I'm doing exactly what my role requires," I said. "I'm monitoring the systems. I'm documenting the events. I'm filing reports through proper channels. You're not intervening. I don't have authority to intervene." Charles made that very clear. The next 30 minutes played out like a slow-motion disaster movie, where everyone knows how it ends, except the people who could stop it. Unit 7's pressure relief efforts created exactly the cascade effect I'd predicted. The automated safety systems, designed for single-unit failures, couldn't handle the simultaneous load across multiple vessels. At 3:47, Unit 7's primary containment seal failed. Not explosively, these systems were built to fail safely, but catastrophically enough to force an emergency lockdown of the entire South Complex. The cascade spread faster than Day Engineering's computer models had predicted. Units 5 and 6 went into emergency shutdown, but the interconnected pressure lines couldn't handle the sudden load redistribution. Secondary failures triggered tertiary alarms, and within 15 minutes, the entire production facility was in emergency lockdown mode. The emergency evacuation alarm started at 4:02 p.m. Not the kind of alarm that meant everyone should be alert. The kind that meant everyone should get out of the building immediately. 47 people evacuated from the South Complex, another 160 from adjacent buildings as a precautionary measure. My phone kept ringing. Charles, Lisa, people from corporate I'd never heard of. I didn't answer any of them. I sat at my desk, documenting the timeline, filing incident reports, doing exactly what my $8,000 bonus had purchased. By 5:30, the immediate danger was over. The facility was shut down, the pressure systems were isolated, and nobody was hurt. But the damage was extensive. 3 major production units offline indefinitely. Environmental containment systems triggered across 6 separate vessels. Cleanup crews staging equipment for what looked like a months-long recovery operation. Kevin came back to our workstations after the all-clear announcement. "Preliminary damage estimates are coming in," he said quietly. "How bad?" "Bad. They're saying $75 million in direct damage, plus another $50 million in lost production if we're down for 3 months. And that's before the regulatory fines. I saved my incident documentation and closed my laptop. 22 years of preventing disasters. And the one time I let one happen, it cost more than my entire career's worth of salaries." "You going home?" Kevin asked. "My shift ended 2 hours ago," I said. As I walked to my car, emergency vehicles were still arriving. Fire department, hazmat teams, EPA investigators. The kind of response you get when a refinery has what the newspapers would call a significant incident. I drove home knowing that tomorrow was going to be very different than today. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd finally done exactly what they'd been paying me to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Charles called me at home that night at 11:30 p.m. I was watching the local news coverage of what they were calling a significant industrial incident at Lone Star Petrochemical. The reporter mentioned potential environmental impact and regulatory investigations. "Brian," he said, and his voice sounded completely different. Smaller, uncertain. "What would it take for you to come in and help with the damage assessment?" "You already decided what I was worth," I said. "This is the result of that decision. That's not fair. This isn't about the bonus anymore." "It never was about the bonus," I replied. "It was about authority and responsibility never matching. It was about 22 years of expertise being dismissed because I wasn't in the right meetings." He tried to say something else, but I hung up. Some conversations don't need to continue. The investigation started the next morning. Nicole Foster from Corporate Audit called me at 7 a.m. before I'd even finished my coffee. "Mr. Patterson, we're conducting a comprehensive review of yesterday's incident. I understand you filed several reports in the weeks leading up to the failure." I did. "Can you be here at 9 a.m.? We need to walk through your documentation." The audit conference room was full when I arrived. Nicole Foster, 2 other corporate auditors, someone from legal, someone from compliance, and a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as being from EPA enforcement. Nicole started with the basics. "Mr. Patterson, walk us through your concerns about Unit 7. For the next 4 hours, We went through every report I'd filed, every email I'd sent, every conversation I'd documented. The progression was clear when laid out chronologically. 3 weeks of increasingly urgent warnings, all dismissed by the same management team that had then demanded I prevent the disaster they'd refused to authorize me to stop. "These recommendations," Nicole said, pointing at my screen. "You filed them 3 weeks before the incident." "Yes." "And management response was consistently to defer to Day Engineering?" "Yes. Even though Day Engineering doesn't have experience with integrated pressure failures." The compliance officer spoke up. "Mr. Patterson, walk me through the typical decision process for emergency shutdowns. Normally, I identify the risk, document the technical justification, and present it to operations management. If they agree, we execute the shutdown with proper authorization. And if they disagree, then nothing happens. I don't have override authority for safety decisions. But you could have intervened anyway during the crisis?" I looked at her straight. "I could have. For 22 years, I've been doing things I wasn't technically authorized to do because they were the right things to do. But after being told my experience wasn't worth a decent bonus and that I should be grateful for relevance, I decided to do exactly what I was authorized to do. Nothing more." The legal representative leaned forward. "In your professional opinion, was this incident completely preventable?" "Completely preventable, with a 6-hour controlled shutdown 3 weeks ago." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Nicole asked the question I'd been expecting. "Mr. Patterson, do you believe management decisions contributed to this incident?" "Management decisions caused this incident," I said. The equipment failure was just the final step in a process that started with dismissing technical expertise. Charles was gone by Friday. No announcement, no farewell email, no transition meeting. Kevin mentioned it when he saw Charles's nameplate missing from his office door. "Went fast," Kevin said. "Went quietly," I corrected. "Nobody wants to advertise management failures this expensive." The final damage report came out 2 weeks later. 127 million in direct facility damage, 45 million in environmental cleanup costs, 30 million in regulatory fines, 6 months of lost production worth $85 million, total cost $287 million, all to avoid a 2 million production shutdown that I'd recommended 3 weeks earlier. The call from Stephen Miller came 3 days after Charles's departure. Regional operations manager, the kind of executive who usually delegates conversation to subordinates. "Brian, we'd like to discuss a new arrangement with you. Senior systems authority position, full decision rights over pressure management, significant compensation, adjustment. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the offer. I don't need to. This isn't about money. It's about 22 years of being right and 3 weeks of being ignored." The headhunter call came that same afternoon. Gulf Coast Energy, looking for someone with my exact experience profile. They'd heard about Lone Star's incident and were very interested in someone who'd tried to prevent it. "Mr. Patterson," the recruiter said, "we've been following the industry reports. Your documentation during that crisis was remarkable. I was just doing my job." "Exactly. That's what makes you valuable. We need someone who understands that preventing disasters is more important than avoiding difficult conversations." The offer was impressive. $165,000 base salary, equity package, full authority over critical systems, and something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine respect for experience. During the interview process, their plant manager asked me a simple question. "If you saw the same warning signs here, what would you expect from management?" "I'd expect them to listen," I said, "and I'd expect authority to match responsibility." "That's exactly what you'd get," he replied. 6 months later, I heard through industry contacts that Charles was still unemployed. The Lone Star incident had become a case study in management failures, and his name was permanently attached to it. Word travels fast in the petrochemical industry, especially when someone's decisions nearly kill people. I ran into someone from Lone Star at an industry conference in Houston. They were rebuilding their entire management structure, implementing what they called experience integration protocols. We could have used that protocol about 8 months ago, I told him. He just nodded. Yeah, we know. As for me, I'm 6 months into my new role at Gulf Coast Energy. Different company, same technical challenges, but with one crucial difference. When I say we need a shutdown, they listen. Last week, I identified early signs of seal degradation on one of their older units. I documented it, sent the report, and had approval for a controlled shutdown within 2 hours. The shutdown cost them $800,000 in lost production. The repair revealed damage that would have caused a failure within days. If it had blown, they were looking at $50 million minimum. Their plant manager thanked me personally. "This is exactly why we hired you," he said, "because they learned the lesson Charles never did. Experience isn't about age or growth potential or relevance. It's about the difference between preventing disasters and explaining them afterward. Some knowledge can't be replaced, only ignored. And when you ignore it, you don't just lose the person, you lose everything they were preventing. The hardest lesson in business is learning that saving money in the wrong places costs everything. Charles saved $17,000 on my bonus and lost $287 million, 200 jobs, and his career. Sometimes the most expensive decision you can make is the one that looks cheapest on paper.